Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today at Research America for an Alliance discussion. I'm Mary Woolley, the President and CEO of Research America, and I'm your moderator today. For the past few weeks, we've been introducing the winners of our Advocacy Award program that will be held in March, coming up March 13th in Washington, and I encourage you to register and join us there. But the awardees have been gracious in taking time to speak with us as a kind of introduction. So I'm very happy to introduce you today to Dr. Abraham Verghese, who is the recipient of Research America's 2024 Isadore Rosenfeld Award for impact on public opinion. And as someone who knew Isadore Rosenfeld well, he's been dead now, I'd say a decade or so. I know how pleased he would be, Dr. Verghese, that you are selected. He was also a dedicated physician, cardiologist, and wrote many books. Not novels, however, although he was a great consumer of thoughtful, important, I would say, novels. I'd like to think I am too. So to just a few words about Dr. Verghese, he is, as you know, a renowned author, and also let me get it right, the Linda R. Meier and Joan F. Lane Provostial Professor and Vice Chair of the Department of Medicine at Stanford University. And he's going to chat with us a little bit about his dual careers, if you will. And before we get started, I just want to remind our audience that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box or in the chat, and we will pose as many as we can during the Q&A portion. So thank you again, Dr. Verghese, for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure. And I did know of Isadore Rosenfeld. I didn't know him personally, but was very aware of his writing. So this is a special honor. And you know, what you do in Research America has never been more critical, you know, both advocating research and bringing the public along with that. So thank you so much. I'm honored.
Oh, you're kind. We share with you a commitment to speeding the day when more people can have healthy, long lives. And it's going to take research as well as the practice of clinical medicine to get us there. I wonder if starting out, you could tell us a bit about yourself, you know, how you came to the field of medicine, how you came to the United States.
Well, it's kind of a long story full of accidents. And I love to tell my medical students that, you know, for all the planning we make, life is really quite ironic. And, I started in medicine in Ethiopia, where I was born. My parents were teachers there. My medical schooling was interrupted by war, and I wound up in the middle of medical school, you know, having to leave as an expatriate, came to America, worked as a nursing assistant, which, you know, I now think of as the best medical training I had. And then eventually finished in India, came here for residency. But I always wanted to be a physician, and you know, was very happy to finally be in the field that I wanted, infectious disease. And I sometimes marvel that I ended up where I am at Stanford, because it really wasn't part of the big plan. I was just happy to practice medicine. But at some point, I began writing, mostly because I was deeply moved by the HIV experience in a small town in Tennessee.
Mhm.
And I wrote a scientific paper about a phenomenon I was witnessing there of many more patients than expected, which turned out to be hometown boys who had lived in the big city for decades now coming home. And that was the moment I became a writer. And, you know, it's interesting how life has evolved for me. I can't say it was part of a master plan. It certainly wasn't.
Well, planned or not, you certainly have been through your career in writing, so in my opinion, so sensitive to the patient, to the people who, even if you can't heal them, You can't cure them necessarily. Well, let me put it the other way around. You can't cure them necessarily. There is an aspect of being able to heal, of helping them in their next years in their journey. And I certainly felt that in several of your books, and I think that was part of why in 2015, I understand that you were awarded the National Humanities Medal by President Barack Obama. So I took a look at that citation. I'm going to read just a bit of it. I think our audience will be struck by this. So you're receiving this award, quote, for reminding us that the patient is the center of the medical enterprise. Dr. Verghese's range of proficiency embodies the diversity of the humanities, from his efforts to emphasize empathy in medicine to his imaginative renderings of the human drama. So the art and science of human connection seems to me at the heart of what you do. How do you talk about that? How does it make you feel?
Well, I think it's really not a novel idea, but it's worth reminding, especially these days, reminding people that, medicine is ultimately a very human experience. It's as much as we can reduce physiology and organ systems to, very orderly schematics. The essence of a human being ill is a very personal thing, and each person responds in a particularly unique way. William Osler, who was like the granddaddy of American medicine, died in 1916, famously said that, it doesn't really matter what disease the patient has, it matters what patient has the disease. And so I think the essential art of being a physician and the appealing part of it to me has been that, we're dealing with very, very different individuals who handle disease and stress very, very differently. And, I think the notion that we can somehow plug all this into AI, we can plug a lot of things into AI, but not this. I mean, I always like the analogy of a newborn baby. I mean, we actually have the technology to care for a newborn child with, robots if we ever decided to, but we would never dream of that because, they need the nurturing, they need mothers, parents to be involved in the same way. I think there is something about illness that is fundamentally, especially when it's serious, is fundamentally not infantilizing as much as reducing you to a very elemental state where whatever care you're going to receive has to be delivered in the form of a caring person, a caring healthcare system, a caring society. And, so that's what makes this very much an art and a science.
Wow, that's so profoundly said, I think. I wonder how you and your colleagues manage to protect yourselves from um, all the vulnerability you have to show to be impactful and empathetic. But you have to move on to another patient. You have to go home at night and rest and recover. How do you manage that?
Well, I mean, I actually think that, speaking of Osler again, I think Osler was also an advocate of some degree of remove from the patient and not showing your emotions. But I think I kind of disagree with it. I think patients need to feel that we are human and that we are moved by their plight, even if it's something we're very familiar with. And whenever I see a medical student on the wards who tears up in some context, I just know we're dealing with a great physician, great future physician there. So, you know, obviously in the setting of an emergency, a crisis, you want to be thinking about airway, breathing, circulation, and not about all the other social things that go with that patient. But otherwise, I think, it's terribly important, as I said earlier, to respond as physicians, but also with the kind of empathy that a fellow human being
Mhm,
should have for another. And I think
mhm.
cynicism is one of the greatest dangers that faces all of us as, as busy physicians. And you have to remind yourself with each patient, every room you go into, that for them, this is, an absolutely central encounter. It doesn't matter that you've been doing this all day. For them, it's unique. And so, I think you do carry some of it home at night, and most of it I feel is a great privilege. I mean, I've been around so much death, especially in this setting of HIV. I think it makes you realize how poignant it is to be alive, and life is kind of like a rose that withers and blooms, and if the rose stayed on forever, it would be a weed. And so, if anything, it makes you more conscious of the ephemeral nature of our lives.
Yes, that's beautifully said. And I feel that that comes to play in your books. I think about in The Covenant of Water, your most recent novel, which for those maybe who haven't read it, my quick summary is it's a fictional story across 3 generations in India, where you have lived, spent some time. And there's a theme in there that's really involves a mystery, I would say, a mysterious ailment, and it does have to do with water. And I remember in reading it, I kept wondering what is it? What's going on here? And it's like and of course I would think this, where Research America, I thought, when we started, I realized, oh, it's being researched. There are people in this family who want to understand what's going on with those who aren't thriving, and also perhaps with themselves as well. Did you think about research as a component of the unraveling of the story, or did you frame it in a different way?
Well, I mean, yes, I did, in the sense that one of the great joys of being a physician, as long as I've been a physician, which is now, almost 40 years of seeing patients,
Mm.
is in my lifetime watching things that we only had vague descriptors of,
Mhm.
uh, such as HIV, the years we spent not even knowing what it was, if you remember.
Mhm.
And then we find the cause, and then we understand the molecular mechanism, and then at some point we sometimes find a cure. So I think the grand sweep of watching, the evolution of medicine in my lifetime was one of the most, exciting things that has happened in my lifetime. New diseases, new cures. So I deliberately wanted to have a novel that involved several generations, so that in the scope of the novel, you could sort of see, medicine evolve. And as a longtime teacher of medicine, I always keep in my back pocket, so to speak, some rare diseases that, in a dull moment, I will trot out in the form of a riddle or a question to my residents and interns. And the particular disease I chose, which is sort of a rare condition of familial drowning, where in every generation someone drowns inauspiciously in the most, sorry, drowns in the most inauspicious body of water, like a bathtub or a pool,
Mhm.
And so watching those 3 generations sort out what this was to me part of the interesting thing about trying to write it. And yeah, I think it captures what you guys are about, Research Alliance. It's about Research America. It's about what, makes medicine so exciting, is that without the research, without the kind of advocacy, we'd be just dealing with the same diseases in the same way for decades. And I think that's what makes this so interesting.
Wow, it's just beautifully said. Well, we, uh, of course, think a lot about research, not in the same way you do, but I wonder if you have any thoughts about the value of involving more patients, or we're all patients, of course, at one time or another, more non-medically trained people in conceptualizing and then carrying out research programs. We hear that it's increasingly valued by the public, but I wonder how you think about it. And would you welcome that? Or
Yeah, I think, one would definitely welcome that. I think very often it is, the heart of translational medicine is that a clinician identifies a problem, or a public member brings to light a problem, And then the translational part is trying to find the science and the research to solve that problem. So, I think it's historically been huge groups of patients advocating for particular diseases. Think of, muscular dystrophy, MS. So it's always been there. I think engaging them more formally at the granular individual lab level is an interesting idea. I confess I don't know as much about it as I should, but I think it's clearly, incumbent on us to be able to translate that research to lay people in a crystal clear way. And maybe that's perhaps where lay partnerships are most valuable, in my mind.
Mhm, mhm. Well, we work with at Research America, we work with quite a number of groups who would like to play, as individuals and as groups, a meaningful role, not as gadflies, but in a meaningful way to try to help direct the um, research enterprise, if you will, toward um, conditions, um, uh, receptivity with the patient audience, rather than assuming all the time that the next step will be the right step. So that can be messy, admittedly, but it may be, life is messy, and it may be that there's more value than so far has been given. Although I would have to say a lot of value has already come from patient involvement. When we think about things like your, um, you know, amazing experience with the early days of AIDS, HIV/AIDS. I also had some early experience, and it really did take patient advocates to speed up both research and appropriate care and the dollars it was going to take to make those things happen. So,
Absolutely. And I remember an iconic photograph that I have somewhere of Larry Kramer with Tony Fauci.
with Tony, yes, yes.
And Larry Kramer had really been castigating the NIH
Mhm.
and Tony Fauci, and but the greatness of Dr. Fauci is that he was listening, and the NIH pivoted, and so did most of us in science. And I think that is the perfect example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a great example. I was very happy to be up close on that. And women's health advocates picked up on the effectiveness of that and then also made a tremendous impact, tremendous impact. Um, but we're talking about other things, not you, but I wonder how you make time. Do you have a regular schedule in the day for how much you write, or do you take a month at a time, or tell us about your process in writing?
well, I've been very fortunate at Stanford for the last 14 years, where Stanford has sort of treated my writing endeavors as sort of the equivalent of a scientist in their lab, which is I think very progressive. So I've been at medical schools previously where, I did my work and all the writing came on the side.
Mhm.
So I've just really been blessed at Stanford, and I have a clinical schedule, but I also have the opportunity to disappear at protected time, just as a scientist might. I'm the biggest enemy of that protected time, and I wind up using it for meetings and other things. So I don't have any secret. I mean, in fact, the pace of my publication would show you that I don't have a secret, because this latest book, Covenant, came 14 years after the previous one. The one before that was 8 years in the making. The one before that, 6. The one prior to that, 4. So I clearly need to pick up my pace, is the bottom line. But honestly, I'm also not in a huge hurry. I love my day job. I write when I'm deeply moved by something, and I love to finish the projects and have them be extraordinarily successful if they can. But if it doesn't happen, nothing has been lost in a sense. I think that that's the great privilege of being in medicine and being able to write from that place.
Yes, yes. Well, I actually didn't realize that Stanford had that excellent judgment to provide you with time, because your contributions in your writing are exquisite, and but at the same time, you get to continue your clinical activities, and I'm sure many other things you're involved in. So we're at a point now where we're going to, time does fly, where we're going to see if we have some questions from our audience. And Jacqueline will join us on the screen here. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. And thank you, Dr. Verghese. This has been a really wonderful discussion so far, very inspiring and thought-provoking. So our first question from the audience starts with empathy, emotions, and storytelling. When and how should we incorporate these presentation skills into the careers of all STEM scientists?
Well, I actually think that story is inherent to science and medicine, though we may not always be conscious of it. Think of when you see a patient, you get a history. Well, the word story is embedded in the word history. And I think in retrospect, much of science winds up being compelling stories. It is helpful, I think, for anyone, not just scientists, to sort of understand the nature of story, that, a story from the time of Aristotle, we've understood that a story is conflict, crisis, and resolution. To me, the importance of that is, as I like to tell my students and residents, even if something is routine for you, for the patient coming to see you, it has all the elements of, conflict, crisis, resolution, in the sense that every visit to a physician has the potential for, some bad news coming around, some change in the trajectory. And in Hollywood, they say drama equals desire plus danger, where, you want something, there's a desire, there's some obstacle in the way, and that's the drama. You come to a doctor's office with the desire to walk out of there being told everything's fine. In science, in pure research, I think that there are equally compelling stories, even if they're happening at the molecular level. The challenge is to make that story translatable to people who don't have the vernacular, who don't have the applied vocabulary.
Yes.
But just reading about the evolution of the mRNA vaccines, for example, for COVID, what a story played out over so many years involving two very fascinating and different characters. So I think we can't escape story. We just need to be more conscious of it.
Great. Thank you. Very interesting. So for our next question, you mentioned AI earlier. So because our healthcare system has become increasingly reliant on sophisticated technology such as AI, can you share your thoughts on how we can make sure we are not losing that human relationship between the physician and patient and the patient's family?
Yeah, I think the human connection between the physician and the patient is already very challenged, especially when you have, large healthcare systems merging, venture capital firms, just buying systems and asking for a kind of productivity that is more typical of a car manufacturing factory. So already with the, so much turnover, so many different shifts, it's a challenge to maintain a human connection. And I think, AI has a great potential to take away some of the drudgery in physicians' lives. Right now, we are literally the highest paid clerical workers in the hospital, spending more time charting things than actually seeing patients. And our residents, I always feel sorry when I see them in a room, because that's where the exchange is happening between consultation, getting results, ordering things. And, that's our doing, that's our fault. We let that happen on our watch. So similarly with AI, hopefully, as has happened with almost every other time-saving device, every other time-saving device has only meant more work for physicians and even less time to spend with the patient. So my hope is that AI will take away some of the drudgery of medicine. All these clerical things we do should easily be able to be done by AI. It should make us much better at diagnosis, much better at, from a public health point of view, keeping track of outbreaks and so on. And I think, but it needs policing. It is neither artificial nor intelligent. It's not artificial in the sense that it's based on my work, your work. It's parasitizing every single thing we've ever written. And it's not intelligent enough to recognize human needs except in a algorithmic fashion. So like every technology, it has serious unintended consequences. And as much as we've talked about them before AI was deployed, it's still going to be a real challenge. So my hope is that, AI makes all the nuisance things for patients, physicians easier, checking in, checking out, filling out the same form 50 times. Really, you shouldn't have to do it. I shouldn't have to do it. And but the obstacle there may not be computing power. It may be a willingness in the Congress and the legislature to enact something so that we're not a healthcare system based so much on fee for service and, that prioritizes procedures over dealing one-on-one with human beings. So it's a lot on our plates right now.
Right.
Those are worthy challenges, I would say. And I know there are several people, Dr. Verghese, who are working in what's sometimes called, health systems research or health services research. Health systems research might be actually like the next iteration of it, so that we can do just as you described, put AI to work to get rid of the drudgery, the clerical, that patients feel and complain about all the time. I know physicians feel this. We ought to be able to do it. We ought to be able to do it. So we're trying to do our part, Research America, because there is, let's learn how to do this right instead of creating the next monster, right? But I don't mean to interrupt the questions. Jacqueline, do we have other questions here?
Yes, I believe we have time for just one more.
Okay.
So, Dr. Verghese, can you share your journey into creative writing from medical writing for those interested in similar trajectories?
Yeah, I think my entry into creative writing was quite by accident. I had no ambition to be a writer, but as I mentioned in writing this paper describing, a sort of a migratory phenomenon in America where young men were leaving their homes for all the reasons you and I do, jobs, education, opportunity, but many of them were leaving because they were gay and didn't want to live that lifestyle under the scrutiny of their friends and relatives. They went to the big city, decades passed, they found themselves, at some point the virus found them, and they were now coming back to small towns like the town I was practicing in. Typically their partners had died and now they were ill. And I had the great privilege of caring for them. And I wrote a scientific paper describing this migration, but I felt that the language of science didn't begin to capture, the degree of tragedy of that journey or the heartbreak of the families or my own grief at watching this happen again and again. And so that was the moment that I decided to become a writer. And, I think the fortunate thing that I had going for me was that I was a reader. I think it's very difficult to think about writing if you don't have a clear sense of the standard that's out there. I mean, I get manuscripts sent to me by people who think that, because their life was interesting, this should be publishable. But they really need a great sense of what is out there, what is the standard, what is good writing in fiction or nonfiction. And so I would say a great part of becoming a writer probably is being a reader and, having been a reader for a long time. And then, it's the willingness to sort of keep revising and, working on it, working on the crafts. You can obviously take workshops and classes and books, but ultimately it's applying yourself to your chair and being ready for lots of rejection and, still going at it, not for some commercial endpoint, but because there's a fundamental truth that you're trying to convey, either in fiction or nonfiction. I love the definition of fiction that I think came from Camus, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's fiction is the great lie that tells the truth about how the world lives. Fiction is the great lie that tells the truth about how the world lives. And I think, if you think about the novels that have transformed societies, Uncle Tom's Cabin, for all the criticism of who that writer was, the story transformed America. It made slavery no longer palatable, and emancipation, I think, owes so much to that novel. If you think of the UK, the novel called The Citadel, about medical conditions in a small Welsh town by A.J. Cronin, many people think that that was the book responsible for the genesis of the National Health Service. And so I think fiction is important because truth is important. Nonfiction, obviously, is hopefully truthful and therefore reveals things to us. So, I think if people listening want to be on the path, there's not much mystery. You just need to start and keep at it and be aware of what the standard is and work hard to get there.
Thank you. Great advice.
Dr. Verghese, yes, you just gave us a master class there. And,
I don't know about that.
how to think about writing, how to become a writer, if you will, the importance of reading as part of it. Thank you so very much for this entire half hour that we've been privileged to spend with you. And I congratulate you again on being our 2024 winner of the Isadore Rosenfeld Advocacy Award. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my honor. So pleased to be with you and to get this award, truly. Thank you all.
Thank you. One quick announcement for our audience as we end the meeting. I encourage you to, especially if you're a member of the Research America Alliance, to join us for a discussion on the 22nd of February with the inimitable Emily Halubowitz, the National Senior Vice President of Federal Advocacy with the American Heart Association. And she will provide an update on what's happening on Capitol Hill. Imagine somebody who could do that, and she does it beautifully. And check in on appropriations for the year that is still not resolved, fiscal 24 and 25 too. So please email Jacqueline, you see her here, for the registration link. And again, thank you so much for being with us today. Goodbye for now. Bye-bye.